Hi, you're listening to the Professional Speaks podcast with me, Craig McKellar, your host. As an ex-Big Four auditor for 6 years, I now run a specialist recruitment consultancy called McKellar Consulting. Throughout this podcast, I speak to senior leaders from the professional services community, past, present and future. These leaders work in accounting and finance, audit, tax, corporate finance, consulting, legal and investments. In the comfort of their own office, I will be posing questions to our guests to gain insights from them across a variety of topics, including balancing work and life, mental health and mindset, risk-taking, and effective leadership. These insights will help us learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what we want to achieve in our careers. Here's what's coming up on today's episode.
The great thing is challenging yourself to be able to do that, to be able to build the team, to be able to convince clients that what you're offering is as good as what they've received elsewhere or what they would receive elsewhere. It's very much about, particularly in the early days of starting a business or doing that sort of thing, it's about being able to convince clients, get them on side, giving them something that they're not getting from elsewhere. And that really excited me. The thought that I could do that, the thought I could build something different. And that's very much been the way I've looked at Claritas ever since.
In this episode, I'm joined by Iain Wright, who is founding partner of Claritas Tax, which is the UK's largest independent tax advisory firm, focused primarily on entrepreneurial and ambitious businesses, their stakeholders and investors. We discuss why he decided to set up Claritas rather than pursue partnership in a large practice firm, and the journey of growing a tax consultancy into the UK's largest independent. So Iain, thanks for coming on the podcast today. For listeners and viewers who might not know you, you are founding partner of Claritas Tax, which is the UK's largest independent tax consultancy, focused largely on entrepreneurial businesses, the shareholders and investors. And you're based in Birmingham, so thanks for appearing on today. Yeah, are you doing well today?
Yeah, I had a nice trip up here on the train this morning.
Good.
For once in a while, Avanti
Good.
did what it should do, got me here on time.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, and it's always great to come to Glasgow.
Yeah, great. No, and we'll chat more as the episode goes on. I know it's not your first time here.
No.
So I like to ask guests at the start, just a bit about you as a person. So can you tell us more just about you, I guess, your upbringing, background, things like that?
Yeah, so I grew up in Derby, or Barbados as it's known to its to its inhabitants, mainly because it is nothing like Barbados.
Yeah.
My parents were both teachers, but they were originally from here. So my mum grew up in Royston Hill, Townhead, and my dad was in Bishopbriggs.
All right, okay, yeah.
But they moved south after they got married. So we used to come up to Glasgow every half term to see the family up here. But yeah, generally it was a fairly normal upbringing.
Yeah.
I did the normal things.
Yeah.
And then went to university in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Originally to do law.
Okay.
So I studied law. I'm not the only wannabe lawyer who works at Claritas. We've got quite a number of people who did law and now have seen the light and have changed into tax.
Yeah.
So that was really the background. And when I was doing law at university, I enjoyed a lot of the legal stuff. I did a tax module as part of that, but I also enjoyed business. And I liked the fact that going into tax, going into accounting rather than law, gave you that mix of the legal side, the analytical, and also the business and commercial side. So that's what drove me to KPMG, where I did a split training contract between audit and tax.
Okay.
Always with a view to doing 3.5 years in audit and then moving into tax on qualifying.
And did were your parents or anyone in your family, were they tax or accountants or anything?
No, my parents were both teachers. My dad taught maths.
Yeah.
My daughter, who's coming up to 18, always takes the mickey that all we'd really do is teach maths when we're doing accounting. But yeah, there's no history of doing accounting, doing tax, doing professional services. Probably the closest, my granddad on my father's side worked in Rolls-Royce for many, many years, both up here and in Derby, which was why the connection between the two. But he then opened a shop. So that's probably the only entrepreneurial streak in the whole family.
Yeah.
So whether I picked that up from him, I don't know. But
Could well have, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's got to be there somewhere.
Yeah, and just you know, talking about Claritas as a business, you know, as I said at the start, you're founding partner, so
Yeah.
you know, I'm really interested to hear more about the journey. But I guess before we do, it'd be good to just say a bit more about the firm. You know, what it is.
Yeah, so we've grown over the last 12 and a half years to about 70 people. We've got 5 offices, so Birmingham is the original office, then Manchester, then Nottingham, and then we opened Glasgow and Bristol at the same time in January of 2024. So we're 5 offices. We've got a notional presence in London, and we're looking to, we'll be opening in Leeds in the spring.
Right, okay.
And all we do is tax. So we don't do audit, we don't do corporate finance, we don't do accounts, which means we don't really compete with many people, which gives us a great place in the market, where we can be honest brokers with most of the people we work with. We're never looking to take work off the people we work with, which I think really gives us a fairly unique standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously found that it's been a good, I guess, strategy to be just tax, but you know, as it's grown, and so do you, I guess, got good relationships with, you know, other professional services, you know, whether that is lawyers or the likes that you're not going to be taking work from.
Yeah, that's right. So we work with a lot of accounting firms who may not have specialist tax advisory teams, so they may be very happy doing tax compliance for their clients, but when it comes to more specialist tax, they need our support, so we work with them. But clearly we're not interested in the audit, so we're never having to put provisions in place to make sure we don't steal the audit. We work with a lot of corporate financiers. We work with a lot of lawyers, wealth managers, various people like that, because we just don't compete with any of them. And so we have a really good relationship with most. And I think that comes out quite often. Quite a lot of the awards evenings, so Insider and Business Desk, people like that who run award schemes, will have votes to determine who should win a particular award. And I think because we're not competing with people, we do pretty well in terms of those awards. A lot of people are very happy to support us, and we've had fantastic support over the years from the professional contacts we work with, and really couldn't praise so many of them. Many of whom are close friends. Enough.
Yeah, no, great. And you know, I believe in your career, you know, when you did set up Claritas, you know, you were probably on the path to maybe, you know, going after partnership in a firm of any size, really. You know, I guess the big question is why did you set up Claritas Tax rather than pursue that maybe partnership route?
Yeah, so I'd got to director at KPMG. I then went to work for a small boutique firm in Birmingham. And that gave me a real flavour of how you could provide the big firm quality, but to a mid-market client base, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the fact that you could be involved in the decision-making and the management of the business and the direction of the business.
Wow.
And that really sort of developed and nurtured a sort of entrepreneurial spark that I'd had for a long time. I'd always wanted to do something different, and that really gave me that impetus. Back earlier on in my KPMG career, I was involved when we set up a specialist M&A tax team in Birmingham. So before that, before 2001, we'd just been sat within the corporate advisory team, but we took a conscious effort to split away from the corporate advisory and sit with corporate finance and transaction services, who were really our biggest clients. And that was, with hindsight, it wasn't my decision. I was fortunate enough to be asked to be part of that. But there were 3 of us who went and did that, a partner and 2 of us. And I think that gave me the sense of building a business, albeit within the big framework of a fantastic professional services firm. But we grew that team from 3 people to 9 people over a relatively short period of time, and created an environment that people wanted to be part of. And those sort of things shaped me and shaped what I wanted to do as I became a little bit older.
Would you say, was that the first time you sense those aspects, those enjoyable aspects, building a team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of the recruitment we did was internal, some of it was external. But the key thing there was being so embedded with your clients, an internal client admittedly, but then that took you into the external clients, and a way of doing business, a way of generating sales, generating profits from really just getting on well with people, understanding what their requirements were, understanding what their needs were, and taking that and creating something that really worked for them, that gave them a much better service than they'd been having before. And so that ethos has very much been with me ever since. But also, bringing in the people, selling, I guess, a vision of what we could do, of what we could be at that time, was really important, and gave a real sense of ownership, albeit, as I say, within a very large firm where you knew your salary was going to be paid every month.
Yeah, no. Less risky, isn't it? But then that experience has ultimately gave you, confidence to then go and move outside of a big four into a boutique, into a role where I'm assuming you had, a lot of responsibility, but more autonomy maybe, or more opportunity to create an impact. And so there's obviously something in that you thought, no, this is what I want. Would you say when you made that move, you kind of knew that was the path you ought to go down in terms of working it, whether it was setting up your own independent or working in an independent? Did you get to a point where you thought, this is more for me now, I've done the big type of business, I wouldn't be going back to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the great thing is challenging yourself to be able to do that, to be able to build the team, to be able to convince clients that what you're offering is as good as what they've received elsewhere or what they would receive elsewhere. It's very much about, particularly in the early days of starting a business or of doing that sort of thing, it's about being able to convince clients, get them on side, giving them something that they're not getting from elsewhere. And that really excited me. The thought that I could do that, the thought I could build something different. And that's very much been the way I've looked at Claritas ever since. And
so, as we come on to the journey of Claritas then, so, what did the first year look like? What did the first 3 years look like?
So the first year I was renting office space in a market town called Redditch, which is just south of Birmingham, from a friend who's got a law firm. So it was about a 10-minute commute from home, which I realised a 10-minute commute is not long enough.
Yeah.
You'd listen to 2 songs and you'd be out of the car.
Yeah.
But it was, in some ways it was great because I went into that office, I had somewhere to go, I wasn't in my bedroom, I wasn't in my garage.
Yep.
I had someone to make drinks for or make drinks for me. They invited me to the Christmas party. So I got a little bit of that benefit. But the first 18 months was just me. I knew before I started, because I talked to a number of friends who were clients and said, this is what I'm planning to do. If I do this, would you carry on working with me? You won't have a big brand behind you. Would you carry on working with me? And they'd said yes. So I had the confidence. So I was able to talk to my wife, who's always been very, very supportive, about what it could look like, about the fact that it may not be the greatest financial decision for a year, 2 years, but we'd be able to pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
We had 2 young kids at the time, but we'd be able to do everything we needed to do. And so the first 18 months was really about building that. Getting to a point where about a year in, I realised, and it had always been the plan to recruit people. I never wanted to be Ian Wright, to be Ian Wright & Co., which is why my name does not feature in the company name. But I always knew I wanted to build something to recruit people. So about a year in, I'd got to a point where I was doing too much work. I was probably getting to a point where I couldn't see the wood for the trees. I was working 7 days a week, late into the evening, because I was having to deliver for clients. So I got to the point at that point where you think, right, okay, I can now afford to take the risk of bringing someone in. So I brought in Dave Nolan, who'd actually worked for me at RSM, or worked with me at RSM. I'd recruited him in to RSM when I was there for a short while. So he joined in February of 2014. We moved the office into Birmingham. And then John Collins joined in April 2014, so that was now up to 3. And John just retired last week. It was his 70th birthday last week.
Wow.
So he retired.
Can I just ask, were you 3 all doing corporate tax, advisory,
Yeah.
also some kind of deals tax with PE houses or?
Yeah, so we were doing some deal work with some clients, particularly in those days with BGF. But we were doing, so we were doing deals tax, we were doing some corporate and international. Dave does a lot of R&D, so we were doing some R&D work. So we were doing a broad mix.
Yeah.
At times we'd have to outsource work where we didn't have the specialism, where we didn't have the knowledge ourselves. I think that's one of the challenges in a small firm. You become more self-reliant, but you also have to know how far that reliance can go. There is no point taking risk in order to be able to provide a client with a service. You've got to be able to say, yeah, I can get that far, but I can't get any further. However much I research around a subject, there is always going to be something I don't know. So there were various people that we called on at the time to work with us.
Taking that ownership with clients, being transparent, is what you're kind of talking about.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what we did, and obviously as time has gone on, we've been able to bring all the different specialisms in-house. And so if I think back to the second 18 months of that sort of first 3-year period, sort of from early 14 through to late 15, we then brought in another couple of people. So we brought in Seth Mamie and Sarah MacDonald. Sarah really to support with all of the management of the business. And then we brought in our first graduate, Faith Ross. All of these people, apart from John, who retired last week, are still with the business.
Wow. What do you put that down to? If you could put that to anything, they might say different things, but all the dodgy photos and the the compromising material I've got on them. I think they engaged with the process. I remember when we were recruiting Seth. So Seth knew Dave. Dave had worked with Seth for a little while in a previous firm. But Seth was, I think he and I have discussed this a number of times, so I don't think I'm talking out of turn. He was nervous about joining an organisation that had 3 fee earners. Yeah.
And I remember talking to the recruitment consultant who was helping him come across. And he explained that he had this nervousness. And I thought, right, how are we going to get him over that? I can tell him, but that's not going to achieve it. So what I did was I got him to sell the opportunity to me and thereby to himself. And so that's what he did. He did a presentation on what the challenges were going to be in working at Claritas, what the opportunities were going to be, and how he was going to use his strengths to take advantage of those opportunities and overcome the challenges. And he did that. I think the more he researched it, the more he thought about it, the more excited he was at the opportunity. And he joined us as a manager. He then went to senior manager, associate partner, and went to partner. I'm trying to think when he went to partner, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and now heads our Nottingham office. I think when I look back on my career, that journey, how he came in and how he's grown, is very, very pleasing. I think it's the same is true for all the team. That people feel there's a sense of ownership, there's a sense of camaraderie, which we've been able to foster within the team. And the big challenge, frankly, as we grow, as we're 70 people now and growing rapidly, is making sure that we maintain that philosophy in that environment.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting to hear about. When we've chatted about it previously, was if you look at the first 3 years or the first 5 years, did it pan out differently than you planned it, or did you not have maybe such a long-term plan in terms of 3 to 5 years? Were you looking more short-term, year by year? So how did you approach it?
Yeah, the year one plan really was to bring in the clients that I knew had promised me they were going to work with me, and then to drink more coffee than I've ever drunk in my life. Seeing everyone I could see.
You also need a lot of coffee.
Yeah, exactly. It helped to help with coping with them as well. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I did. I just got round to as many people as I could. I did presentations. I put out thought pieces in online media. I managed to get myself interviewed by Tax Journal. They did a 60 seconds with feature on me about starting the business. And so I just did all of that as much as I could to get around. And I knew that was very much the first year plan. Sort of embed the clients, build the contacts, do as much as I could in order to generate income. The year 2 and year 3 plans really were building on that and getting into transactional work, getting into some of the other stuff that we still do.
And as within, you talked about getting to a team of 3, maybe 4 there, and then now you're 70. I mean, it's really inspiring to hear about that growth. Recruitment, people obviously vital to a successful business and growth journey. What was your approach to that? You hear a lot of people say hire based on attitude, not on skills. You hear people saying the opposite. You hear people saying, I guess it's case by case, or depends on what you need. Maybe you want to hire a really technical person who's maybe doesn't have a great attitude, but maybe they just are happy to do some sort of technical job and get on with it, and that's good for the business. Kind of what was your approach when you're hiring people? Because I think, like you're saying, Cess, individuals they'll have to get over their head or get over the fact that they're moving from a large organisation where they've maybe got lots of infrastructure and support to a smaller organisation. But for you hiring people, it also matters about who you're taking on.
I think I realised a long time ago that however much effort it takes us to get through our exams, however much time we spend building our technical knowledge, at a certain point, if you're a client buying professional services, the technical knowledge is taken for granted, taken as read. I wouldn't be selling those services if I couldn't provide them. I think the same is true with people. You've got to be able to do it. So we will always have a technical interview as part of any recruitment process for a fee earner. Because if they can't do the job, it doesn't matter how good their attitude is. They're going to be a liability. So we always make sure that we have that. But, especially, actually I was going to say especially back then, but especially now as well, the cultural fit is vital. So I would always spend a lot of time getting to know someone, having a general conversation with people. Now we've professionalised it with a lady called Debbie Osborne, who's our operations director. She, who I know you've dealt with, but she now does a sort of psychometric test. She will do a sort of cultural fit interview. Before we used to do that ourselves, but the cultural fit was absolutely vital because once you've got over that technical hurdle, then what differentiates you as an individual from any other individual? If you're joining a firm or if you're looking at someone, what differentiates person A from person B? It's how they're going to fit into a team, how are you going to get on with them, how you're going to feel when it's 5:30 on a Friday and a project's going badly and the client needs that piece of work before the weekend. How is that person going to react? How are you going to get on with that person? So that's always been really key to what we do and the way we do it. And that, so the culture and the technical have to be key parts of that.
And would the culture be, going into kind of the values of Claritas? Because obviously some firms, hire based on culture because meaning if they're like us, we'll hire them. But obviously, it's good to have diversity in companies where maybe you're with people that are not so much like you, but they align to the values of the firm. Would you say that's very true for Claritas?
Yeah, you have to get what the firm's about, which is why I mean, ever since we started that process with Seth of getting him to convince himself as to why it was going to be great working for Claritas, we get people to do similar sort of exercises to think about what it's going to mean. How they've got to, their values have to align, and they've got to be convinced that their values are going to align with ours, as well as us being convinced that their values are going to align with ours. But clearly, what you don't want is a whole. The last thing anyone needs is 70 Iain Wright.
Yeah.
The Arsenal fans used to think there's only one Iain Wright, but clearly there's at least two.
Yeah.
Although there's only one in my household. But you wouldn't want 70 identical people. I think it's really important to have diversity among your workforce in terms of background, cultural, gender, whatever else it may be. Those things are really, really, really important to make sure we have a balanced team, to make sure we have a team that reflects our clients as much as anything and reflects our clients' aspirations. Because you've got to work as a team with the clients as well as with as well as internally.
Yeah. Would you say, having a high performing, fast growing tax consultancy, when you're hiring people, obviously you just said you need them to be technically competent, have a skill set. Their attitude needs to be right. Is that aligned to the values? Is that attitude, someone coming into consultancy, is it kind of, what is it? Is it having a client first mindset? Is it something else? How do you, or how have you and others created the culture that is in Claritas at the moment?
I think probably the biggest thing is the ability to get on with others and to take a collaborative approach. Because there's a lot of cliches, aren't there? And without making this sound like an episode of The Apprentice, team is very important. And it's when you're assessing someone for character and for attitude, it's very much how are they going to interact with people. Is there a risk that they'll bully somebody? Is there a risk that they'll do other things that really annoy people, that they just won't contribute, that they'll not fit in, that they'll...
You want a collaborator, not a disruptor type of
you do.
personality.
The firm as a whole, I think, is a disruptor. Because we've created a niche that I don't think was really there 12 and a half years ago in terms of independent tax firms. There are some other independent tax firms around, and there are some that started at that sort of time, but really, if I think back to when I started Claritas, certainly there was nothing in Birmingham when we're talking about the second city. I know it may not be the case elsewhere. There are other firms doing independent tax advice, but just not many. So we're a disruptor as a firm, but you don't want people to be disruptive.
No.
You want people to come in with ideas and to challenge ideas. That is really important. You want people to add something, but being disruptive for the sake of disruptive within the team is probably not a good thing.
I mean, I don't know if you've got any examples or you can think of any, but through all the people you've met, spoken to about joining Claritas, where maybe you've decided they're not the right person, has it? Have you just kind of seen that in the conversations, and you've just got a sense of they're not right for our clients and for our people in the business because of maybe their I guess the way that they give answers to certain questions, which kind of drives it out of all of them.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to put my finger on specific examples, but I mean, you can see people who don't engage with processes. I talked a few minutes ago about the process we have around cultural fit and around psychometric testing. And we've had candidates who wouldn't engage with that. And if you're not going to engage with that, then
that's okay, but it's not going to be.
Well, it's not okay for us. You're not going to get on with us. So it's easier to put my finger on those sort of examples where people just haven't got what we're about and haven't been willing to try to get what we're about, and so they've behaved in that kind of way.
Yeah, which is I mean, it's I guess it's a good screening exercise to do, because ultimately, you know, what you are doing is, you want to get the right fit, and you want that person who's interviewing, you want it to work for them, you know, as much as you want it to work for you, you want it to work for them as well, so it works for everybody. So, you know, that makes absolute sense.
I'm a firm I'm a firm believer that you get the right people in, and you do everything you can to retain them, because it is incredibly expensive to lose somebody. You think about the process, and having been there in the past myself, you start thinking about whether you're going to move. So something has made you disillusioned, made you want to look outside. You go through a process, probably before you call someone like you to ask what jobs are available on the market, what opportunities are there. You go through that sort of silent, as it would now be called, silent quitting, don't you, of getting disillusioned with a firm. You're then disengaged when you go through a recruitment process, because you're thinking, I'm now leaving this firm. You then do your 3 months notice or 6 months notice, depending on grade and depending on the policy of the firm you're leaving. So now you've gone through 6 or 9 months potentially where you're not really engaged in your current firm, and then the person who's coming in to replace that person has to come in, get up to speed. It's going to take them 3 or 4 months to understand how you do things, understand the clients, understanding their requirements. So you've lost a year, maybe more, of real commitment and real quality
from the business
perspective between the person leaving and the new person joining, and the new person being fully up to speed. So recruitment mistakes are horrifically expensive. Now, that doesn't mean we're risk averse when it comes to recruitment. I don't think we could do what we've done if we were completely risk averse to it, but it does mean you've got to make sure it's right. It's got to be right for both sides.
And going back to what you said, you know, you've got a process, so you know, that is hopefully a way to mitigate you know, costly hires. And
look, the process is refined over the years, and it's not always worked, but it's hopefully worked 70 times more than it hasn't.
No, it seems to be doing well. What would people maybe be surprised about of a boutique and independent, you know, maybe compared to a big four or a large business?
I think the thing they'd probably be surprised at more than anything is that we have a very similar ethos in terms of the quality of what goes out the door. We're not cutting corners, we're not trying to do things on the cheap. We want to do things as well as any other firm, and really, we certainly benchmark ourselves against the big firms in terms of the quality of output. I think that may be one of the things that would surprise people, that we have all of those sort of processes. So we have the same sort of 4-eye review process if you're putting out advice. We've got the specialists within the team now, so we're able to provide all of those sort of inputs. I think that's possibly one of the biggest things that people would be hopefully pleasantly surprised at. I think the other side of it, maybe things that they wouldn't be so surprised at, is that we do have a much more collaborative, human-based approach. We don't manage by numbers. If you were sat opposite me in our office, you would not be senior manager number 37 who just happened to be in Glasgow. You'd be Craig. And you would work with the same people all the time. And I hear that from people who've joined us from some of the big firms, particular, probably grades up to even sort of director, associate partner, where you are not working with the same people all the time. You don't get to know your team. Your team and the people you work for don't necessarily get to know you in the way you would like. And so we've always focused on making sure that works, that we grow, we work nationally, but people are working with the same people all the time and build relationships.
And I was just going to ask on that, is that why your strategy, your growth, you mentioned at the start about all the cities that you're in now, you're kind of so focused on having boots on the ground in different regions rather than, we'll just open it up to someone to work for that office but remotely, because actually at the size and stage you're at, that's not the best thing to do for the Claritas employees and culture, and B, your clients?
Yeah, so what we want to do, and Glasgow is a great example of it, is we want to get critical mass in each city. But once we've got critical mass, it really doesn't matter where people are based, which is a great opportunity for us because we are working with clients. It's obviously a lot easier now than it was before the pandemic because you can do things on Teams.
Yeah.
We like to see clients face to face. You get so much more out of those meetings, but there's an awful lot you can do after that on Teams. And you might have one in 5 interactions face to face, and the other 4 can quite happily be on Teams.
Yeah.
Which means you can work, clients can get to know everyone in the team, even if they don't see them face to face all the time.
Yeah.
So that very much enables us to build a team across the country, wherever we can find the right people with the right aspirations, the right ambitions, the right cultural fit for Claritas. But yeah, when I look at Glasgow, at the moment we're 2 people. At the moment we're talking to 2 more people who could come in to Glasgow. We want to get that as quickly as we can to 10, 12 people because that then really gives critical mass. It allows us to go into the market and say locally we are here with a good presence. You can go to events, you can go to dinners and people can say, oh, there's the Claritas team.
Yeah.
That is important both from a staff and staff retention perspective because there are people to bounce off, to talk to, because even though we work nationally, you're still going to have most of your conversations and your banter, and you're going to make coffees for the person who's sat opposite you.
Yeah.
And the same is true with clients. So you need to be able to go out and see people. So we need that sort of critical mass.
To build relationships as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, that's what, I guess another cliche saying, people buy from people, but it is still true.
Yeah. And we're working on it, but we don't have the brand that will just keep the phone ringing all the time. The phone does ring a lot, and I think back to the early days when I was doing all the phoning. It's very nice. Yeah, the phone rings far more in than it probably does out now. Yeah, which is great. Which is a real sign of how we've matured as a business and how our clients value us. But people, as you say, people buy from people, and you need to be in the market.
Yeah. So, thinking of the next maybe 5 years or so, have you got in mind what you want Claritas to do?
Yeah, so we are growing at the moment, top line about 35 to 40% a year. We put out a kind of infographic just after Christmas to talk about what we've done during 2024, although that doesn't match our financial year, which is to August. But we've grown 36, 37%. The aim is to carry on growing at that sort of rate because that creates opportunity for the people within the firm.
Yes.
You don't have to wait for a business case because when you're growing at that sort of rate, the firm creates its own business cases for promotion, which is a great place to be. And having seen it on the other side where you do have to often wait for the right opportunity to come about, it's a really positive selling message when we're talking to candidates. So we will carry on growing in that sort of way. As I said, we're opening in Leeds in the spring. I think there are a few other big cities we could look at. Maybe Edinburgh. Who knows? Maybe somewhere like Aberdeen. I think Reading. But one of the big opportunities at the moment is really to do something in London.
Okay.
Which has been something we've been trying to do for a while. Trying to get someone into London to really build that presence.
Well, a lot of excitement to come.
Yeah, so that's the game. So
just as we're wrapping up as well, so coming, I guess, a bit more short term, thinking of the next 12 months, any professional and personal goals that you have?
I think personally, I did manage to set some New Year's resolutions this year. I'm quite big on sort of goal setting, but often I don't necessarily write them down. But this year I was quite conscious to write down my resolutions of what I was going to do. So the normal things about being fitter, and I've been trying to get out for a run 3 times a week, which I've pretty much managed to do, which I'm feeling quite pleased with myself.
Well done, yeah.
I also set an objective of being home by 8 o'clock most nights, which read into that what you will about the time I should actually be home. I often take the mickey out of Matt Hodgson, who runs our Manchester office, who's the other main shareholder in the business now, about him spoiling good walks by walking around with a set of sticks. But I have been telling myself for a number of years that I should really start playing golf.
Right.
I'm in my 50s, it's time to do that sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you see the social side to that, so I'm keen to do that. Professionally, I think expanding the 3 new offices that we've opened in the last year and a half, and the same with Leeds, so that'll be 4 really to get them to critical mass, 10, 12 people in each. At the moment we've got 5 or 6 in Nottingham, we're about to have 4 in Bristol, we're only at 2 in Glasgow, but as I say, we're talking to a couple of people. So really building those out, getting those to a critical mass. And also we're looking to grow to about 10 million of turnover within the next 12 months.
Great.
So that's part of the objective.
What is it 8.5 at the moment or so?
So on a last 12 month basis, we're about 8 at the moment.
Yeah.
The aim for this financial year is to get to about 9.5. Which I think if we decided to enter it would push us a decent way up the accountancy age top 100.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we're doing. But the turnover, for the sake of turnover, is not really the aim. The growth in turnover is because of, or the desire to grow turnover is because of what it allows us to do, the opportunities it creates for people.
Yeah.
I think we've got a really good story to tell about independent tax advisory and tax compliance work. Because compliance, we've talked a lot about advisory, compliance is really important.
Yeah.
Because we can do things differently. We can do things hopefully in a value-added way for clients. But creating that whole tax firm, tax boutique, growing it, showing that it can be done is really quite important.
Great.
And of course, the big thing in all of that is we want to achieve those objectives, but we don't want to lose what we've got, which is, without sounding like Donald Trump, making Claritas or keeping Claritas great.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing the hats.
Well, sadly, they would be the same colour as MAGA. The red and white.
Exactly. There you go. No, good, great, and that's really interesting. I think a lot of people listening and watching this will find all that really interesting. And if they haven't heard of Claritas, now they have, and we'll be able to watch their journey from now on. So thanks again, Iain. Great
thank you, Craig.
Okay.
Thanks. It's been really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Professional Speaks podcast. This podcast was produced by Springwood Studio Productions. Remember, you can watch the episode recording on our YouTube channel, and if you can, please do subscribe and share with all of your friends. The more people who listen to this, the more guests we can have on to share, so that you can learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what you want to achieve in your career. Please also contact me if you have any feedback on this episode. I'd love to hear from you.